Product management is rarely a job of succeeding because someone gave you a piece of paper and said, go do exactly this. It's not about nailing the engineering, it's about nailing the problem. It's super hard to say, I'm going to build a house at 18 and then go build a house. But you could build a product. But the number one thing I would recommend is building a portfolio, saying, here are problems that I've seen in the world. Here are better ways to solve those problems. And here's why. The why is such a crucial element of the entire solution. If you did this straight for 2 years and you did more than 6 products, you'd probably be a founder. Forget about being employed by a company.
How much do you make?
10 years in, make anywhere from
Did you say 900,000?
Product management has grown so much that you could enter it directly out of undergrad. You could enter it without going to undergrad.
Okay, so that is epic because hello everybody, welcome to the My Career Shop podcast, and today with me to discuss the role of a product strategist, I have Bhavna Devani, who has a wealth of experience in the product field as she's worked as a product manager, specialist, and strategist. And she's been involved in this world for well over a decade. With that experience, she has founded her own company called Apricity Consulting, which is dedicated to product strategy and innovation consulting. Excited to have you today as a guest and just learn about this entire product field.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I'd love to just get started with an introduction about yourself and how you actually got into your current role as a product consultant.
Oh, as a product consultant. Yeah, I think a lot of my background in consulting is expert-based consulting. So it comes from seeing the product experience, if you will, in a variety of form factors, everything from phones to tablets to computers to fridges and cars, and sort of expanding on that into a business lens and starting to really build into what it means to run product from a business angle. And that's been maybe the prerequisites for being a good product consultant.
Okay, so until I started working on my own product,
Yeah.
I had no idea what the hell this field was about. So can you just tell the viewers that we're not talking about, purchasing like an object and the field of technically it is, but can you just explain what the field of product is about? And I know it's
Yeah.
more applicable in the software world. So can you just give me like an example of where you fit in? Because my
Oh, yeah.
understanding is that there's like a software, right?
Mhm.
And then there's like a sales team, and
Sure.
then there's a strategy, and then there's a cybersecurity person, and then there's a tech person, and there's all these individuals that have these competencies, right? And
Yeah.
so where does the field of product fit within that incredibly complicated matrix of what goes into like one software offering?
Sure. I think that's a very good question. And usually people don't think about this until they have tried to build their own product and it's failed. But it's a lot like being a general contractor on a construction project, or a metaphor I used to use a lot was the Babelfish in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Worth a rewatch if you haven't seen it recently. You really are the connective tissue. You're the person who is identifying where we're heading, why we're heading there, and making the millions of decisions that sit between the entire team, all of their expertise and execution. And a lot of times that results in people feeling like product managers are the people who fall on the sword when everything goes terribly wrong, and sit and clap in the background when everything goes right and gives everyone else their flowers.
A thankless job. That's how you explain it.
A rewarding job.
So I'd love to see what teams is product most connected to, because obviously I don't think product is that connected to like cyber or like all these other things, and I'm sure they
Sure,
do
yeah.
talk, but where does the communication line matter the most? So are you like the people that discuss directly with the individuals that came up with the idea, and then you talk the most to like UX
Yeah.
designers, UI designers, and those people, like who are you most comfortable, or do you just encounter the most?
I think that unfortunately really depends. It depends on the type of product you're building. It depends on where you are in the hiring order. Are
Mhm.
you the first product hire and the CEO's just transitioned from, defining the product to fundraising? Or are you the product manager for the search results page at Amazon? They're all incredibly different, and as a result, the role is really different. And so it's less about um, this specific type of person or expertise that you're dealing with, and it's more about what is most adjacent to the product, what brings the product to life, whether it's design, user research, or actual mechanical engineering. What is it that actually brings the product to life, and how do you actually improve it? And then the business components. So if you have a completely new product and you're doing a zero to one launch, which Apricity focuses on a lot in the innovation space, then marketing is key. But if you're already a market leader and it's fully saturated, then your interaction with marketing can be far less. And it becomes sort of perfunctory. You're letting people know they already have a plan and everything is sort of moving in a very steady direction. And
Mhm.
as a result, the people you interact with the most might actually be quality assurance and engineering. So I think it really depends on what you're building, when you've been hired, and who your user base is.
Mm. Can you give me an example of a product? You talked about something, and I don't know if anyone would
Yeah.
catch on to that. You talked about the search function at Amazon, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it's interesting because such for Amazon, that could just be the product, right? And so
Oh,
can you
yeah.
yeah, because I mean, it's firstly probably the most sophisticated and greatest experience. And they work on it so much, and it's been iterated to perfection, right? And so can you just give a few examples of product? And the reason why I'm honing in on this is because
Sure.
I live in the world of careers, and I had no idea what the hell product management is about. I genuinely, like, when I first heard about a product manager, I thought these were the people that worked at the back of the warehouse and they managed like the
Yeah.
supply chain of products, right?
In a
And
way.
I mean, sure, right? But I was so off. When you start learning about the type of products they're managing, it's a completely I think product management is going to become a huge field, right? Because we've kind of moved towards this world of everything is a software offering, everything is going to be AI related. There's going to be, you know, all our products are turning digital, right? And so as a result of that, the software teams are going to be more sophisticated, and the bridge between them, the product managers and all the other teams that make this world happen, um, it's going to become, I think it's going to become, we're going to be needing them more and more. So I just love a few examples of like some products, even like maybe if you can talk about some of the products that you worked on. I'd love to hear a few examples.
Yeah, I think the first note I would make is it's been eating the world for a while
Hmm.
now. I think an interview with Andreessen Horowitz came out in 2011, where he famously claimed that software was eating the world, and we're well into that stage.
Hmm.
Nearly every object you interact with is either leveraging software or will be, or someone somewhere has created a version that is software enabled. And we can think of examples that feel ridiculous, like a water bottle by Ember that says, "Hey, this is how much water you drank. Is it too hot? Is it too cold?" etc. And people really thought that was an overreach. Or we can think of things that are wildly functional and the software sort of disappeared into the experience. And you can think about that in terms of cars that are largely software based. The idea of a 1990s car that you can sort of just roll into a shop and some guy is going to fix it without a computer is long past. And it's moved far, far beyond most people's recognition. When they think about software in cars, they think about self-driving. They don't think about the number of little pieces of software that are driving all of their systems inside of their car.
Hmm.
For example, um, the products that I've gotten to work on in the past have really varied though. So I've done a lot of e-commerce for brandless.com, for PBM in the healthcare space, helping underinsured folks understand how they can order generic medications online, and for eBay as it went to look into new markets. And I've also done more interesting, sort of like beyond the effort of just moving something in real life to the internet, right? Because e-commerce is really taking shopping from brick and mortar to a digital experience. And it's very complex and it's grown more complex, but I've also built completely new things. So when I worked at Pearl Automotive, we really worked on making dumb cars smart and leveraging phones and building internal Bluetooth systems that would allow you to have a backup camera you could install in less than 30 seconds. And so that range has allowed me to understand a lot of patterns that occur not just in the development of product, but also in the process of speaking to users and the assumptions that we make about what we hear users want, and building my intuitive skills and my understanding and knowledge of what that experience might look like when it's digitized, and then starting to combine that with business strategy, right? The traditional MBA toolkit. What is the market size? What is our TAM and our SAM and our SOM? What are we looking to actually return out of this product? What is our pricing strategy? Where is their actual value, and how much can that really be driven in terms of marketing and visibility and awareness? Can you make your value proposition clean and clear? So there's a really wide range, and it's been exciting because it's continuously different. Even if I had stayed in e-commerce my entire career, it would have been continuously different, and it would have exploded in so many different interesting ways as technology has continued to grow. There was a point in the early 2010s where people could not really conceive of the fact that people would buy products using their phone, that they
Hmm.
would transfer critical, right, banking information over their phone. That was considered beyond the pale, not possible. And now you tap your phone to get onto the train. Like,
Yeah.
it's a fully different experience, and it's only been a decade.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that was a great description of what a product is. And I wanted to.
Yeah, did you feel like it was succinct?
Oh, I mean, it was great because I mean, now I think at least the viewer knows that it's not an Amazon package on a conveyor belt. But I mean, just moving from my own understanding of this. So when I was looking at all the different titles in this world, there's like a product manager, there's a specialist, there's a designer. For somebody that's looking to get into this field, like, can you shed some light on what those titles are and how seriously you should take them and what they mean?
Mm, yeah, I think product is still an emerging field. So there's not a lot of hard and fast rules about what product looks like. There's an idea of good and bad, but not necessarily a mutually exhaustive list that this is what each role is considered to be. I think it's most important to think about your responsibility set. Are you responsible for simply translating, right? And this job is thankfully going away with AI, but are you simply responsible for sitting next to someone on the business side of things and saying, this is what the business wants, and translating it and putting it into a computer? That would be the most basic entry role, right? Like putting it into Jira, writing a story, prioritizing the story, running the agile functions. From a product angle, it's an essential thing to understand how agile works and to be able to do all of those steps. But if that's your full-time job, that's an entry-level job. If you are looking across a product portfolio, and most products that people interact with are part of a portfolio, actually, and thinking about what moves next or where there's opportunity to sort of find more optimization between these products, or who our competitors are when we look at a full landscape of all the products that we build and where our competitors sit against each vertical, then that's, I would argue, closer to the top of the career experience, right? You're really defining and understanding the entire strategy of what's being sold. Because so much of software is free, I think people forget that it is still being sold, right? So much of it is powered by advertising. But if you think about Nike, Nike has an inventory set. They have a set of shoes across every gender, and someone's job is to figure out what's going to come next. What are we going to build next? Is it going to be a running shoe? Is it going to be an Olympic tide campaign? Is it going to be something focused on, breathable knits? Whatever the case might be, that strategic decision is really the top of the product career journey.
Okay, so but these titles themselves, like they're somewhat synonymous, you would say? Like a product specialist versus a product manager, they kind of do the same thing, but like where you get hired, like depending on the level of experience, you'll be doing very different things.
Yeah, I think the titles exist. They don't often mean the same thing from place to place.
Oh, okay. They do not?
Not often. It's starting to become more streamlined. So a senior manager versus a lead PM or a group PM, but even a lead and a group PM, depending on the organization, could be synonymous. It's really about the responsibility set, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's cool to know. It's, what's really interesting to know?
Yeah.
That product managers sit at such a crucial part of the strategy, because I was under the impression that some like directors or some, company level execs came up with stuff and then they passed it down to other teams to kind of work on it. But apparently not.
Why would you say apparently not?
Well, I mean, you're involved in that, right? Like the product world seems to be very, very involved in that whole thought process of the strategy aspect, like the senior product management. So how does it work at a company? Is it like, do execs give you, like, how would what type of instructions come towards a product manager? Is it like, we're moving in this direction and come up with a product? Or is it like,
Sort
hey,
of, yeah.
oh, okay.
So, I mean, it can be that big. So, for example, when you have an innovation strategy, a lot of times the strategy comes from the strategy group, not to use the word endlessly in my definition, but the folks who are figuring out what new markets and what new verticals of users or populations, if that feels better, to pursue. And they might turn to a product manager or a set of a lead PM and say, here's where we want to go. And here's what we think is going to work there. For example, a good example for my own career was when we went to Russia with eBay. It wasn't that Russia wasn't already in eBay. It's that it was never really a focused effort. We built the site, made a domain, worked really hard to get PayPal up and running there. It was quite difficult, and allowed commerce to exist. And to build a tailored solution there, the strategy group said, hey, here are the places where we see the most activity happening. We see people buying fashion, and we see them buying it in groups. So if you and I are related and we're cousins, I might just hit you up every month with a full list of all the things I want, and you'll be responsible for buying those things for me. And my transfer of cash to you will be outside of the app entirely. I will not be on the app, etc. So the debate was, could we capture more market share by building a tailored solution and building an application that is actually focused on the Russian experience? And how do we do that without overinvesting? And there you're really bringing in the lean startup ideas of like Eric Ries and really thinking about, how do I build something small to prove out my value proposition? Once we've done that, they basically turned to the product team and said, build me something that does this. And we went off and we talked to folks on the ground in Russia. We found corporate partners in Russia, in Moscow Fashion Week, and startup partners that could build us interesting plugins to work with our ecosystem. And we retooled the app and fixed legacy problems and built a new experience and deployed it. But a lot of that seed came from the strategy team and from data analysis. And what we're seeing now is that a lot of folks are involved in data analysis. Product managers should be looking at data, product marketing managers are looking at data, strategists are looking at data, and the data team is looking at data. So everyone's sort of like trying to understand what patterns we're seeing in the products we're building and trying to figure out where to head. It's usually the business team, though, that's going to decide a direction.
Okay. Awesome. Again, very comprehensive.
Too comprehensive.
No, I love it.
Okay, all right.
Making my mind. Honestly, I feel like with conversations like this, I could have like a 5-hour interview because I feel like I'm learning everything from scratch. But obviously, we don't have time from that. But let's just rehash everything that we learned. The main fields, the main titles in this area are product manager, product strategist. You get more streamlined versions of that. Each company is slightly different with respect to the actual title. So for the purpose of somebody trying to crack into this field, let's stick to discussing a product strategist. And if we use these terms, like, it'll just make it slightly easier, right? So how do you get into this field?
How do you get into product? I would say that there are lots of days where I wonder why I became a product person, and yet so many people are so excited to get into the field. It's continuously amazing to see it grow. The way that I would think about this is, where are you coming from? So if you already have a job and you're looking to transition into product, I would say it's important to start thinking about and showing your ability to meld strategy with the development of a prototype that has a clean value proposition. If you can do that, which again, AI has really enabled almost anyone to do in their nights and weekends, then you can make that pitch and start applying. And I would suggest applying internally for that first role or for a rotational program somewhere.
So are there no educational requirements in the field of product?
Largely it's to have a BA, and sometimes depending on the product, like let's say you were gonna tell me you wanted to be a product manager at Anthropic, I would say you need to have subject matter expertise.
But like, there's no like set requirement. That's like more a field thing, right? Like, so like, you're unlikely to get a job, but there's no prerequisite to becoming one.
It's not like being a doctor.
Yeah.
Or a lawyer. You're not going to pass a specific test and then be granted entry into the field. The field is so new that there isn't that kind of definition of success, of belonging. We're seeing a lot of subscription and membership-based communities emerge, I would say, in the last 5 years. But law has been around forever and has had a really long time to build up qualifications and requirements and gates and tests and sort of paths that people can pursue. Product is really a fairly new career, and so it doesn't really have as much of that. What is most important, in my opinion, is for you to identify 3 strengths where you want to exceed. And product requires a motley of skills, right? Like, you should be able to understand how the internet works, how engineering works, how design works, how user research works, how data and analytics works. And so there's a need to be sort of a generalist. And then you want to pick, in my opinion, 3 things that you're really better at than most people. McKinsey believes in sort of a T, right? They prefer like a single depth, but I tend to think that product does best when you have more of a W sort of experience. So for me, I'm best at user research. I understand how to run it, teach other people how to do it, interpret it, build it, execute it in and out. I can write a book about it. I have written a book about it.
What's the name
Data
of the
and
book?
user research.
Oh, okay.
An introduction or a field guide to user research.
But
It's very on the nose. But yeah, so I focus on user research, I focus on data and analytics, and I focus on strategy. And I think all product managers should choose 3 things that they really want to be great at and above the cut, top 20-25% of their field, and then start figuring out sort of how to proceed from there.
okay. Like, how many different like competencies or skills are there? Like, can you give me an example of few? Like, because you said you should like hone in on 3, right? And
Yeah.
so you said user research, you said data analytics, and you mentioned a bunch of other. Can you give an
Yeah.
example of as many that come to your head?
As many, like a lightning
Whatever
round
comes to your
question.
head.
Sure. So you should definitely understand quality assurance. How do you test things? How do you build test cases? How do you read test cases and understand where they're headed? Data and analytics we've talked about, but actually it can be broken into a bunch of different things. So you should be able to understand the paths that users are taking through your application. Funnels. So where do people join? Where do they start to drop off? That mimics more of a marketing understanding of a product. You should be able to understand the ability to see cybersecurity and other like major errors and fail states of your application. So for example, I built an application at one point, literally December 21st, we thought we were having a DDoS attack on our launched live application. You have to be able to know that that's happening by reading what is actually occurring in the application. Then you need to be able to understand design. So I think a lot of product managers can feel like their job is to say, this looks pretty, and I don't like that, and can you make this font a little bit smaller? But the reality is really to understand design as a craft and to understand what's been requested of the design team, right? And what does it mean to be an advocate for the user when you're building a business? So you also have to be able to understand cost-benefit optimization. As you go through all of these different skills, how do you not only make a decision that is optimized, but also convey that decision to other people? Build narrative skills, communication skills, negotiation skills to navigate your own workplace, but also to understand partnerships with other companies. So there's a wide set of skills that really is broken down by your responsibility set and by where you and your background can drive you to success in the field.
Wow, that was great. I have some follow-ups on that.
Yeah.
So I have QA, data analytics, funnels, cyber, all these things. Which of these skills do you think are like, sure, you should have like 3 of these in order to find some
Yeah.
success? Like, which of these do you think you must have? Like every single person in the product
What's
field.
the common core of being a
Yeah,
product manager?
yeah.
Definitely critical thinking, the ability to learn new things, and the ability to communicate. If you cannot do those things, you will not succeed. And I think that's why we see so many people who are successful at product management coming from the liberal arts. That's why you see product management as an entry gate from non-traditional paths like myself.
Okay. And so do you need any technical skills then? Or do you like, I mean, if you're like, how do you know about data analytics and cyber threats and like design stuff unless you have
Mm,
is like the technical expertise in that particular area? Are you like, what I'm trying to get to is like, is product kind of like a field you get into slightly later in life because you started off in like cybersecurity and you
mm.
somehow somebody gave you a project to create like a wireframe and then you learned and you're all like, one day you learned about this field called product. Like, is it secondary, or like, how do
Is
you
that is
get
that
so
what
many
happened to
random
you?
skills? Like, I feel like, so when I was really young,
Yeah.
I didn't have that much money. So I
What?
decided on earning money by designing websites. And so I was, I think, like 9 years old when I saw like an HTML book. And
Sure.
I cracked it open. I learned about HTML. I happened to learn about Adobe. Then I learned Photoshop, Image Ready, blah, blah, blah. Before I knew it, all these random skills that had nothing to do with what I was pursuing, I knew by the age of like 14. And so I see, like, I'm trying to figure out, how would someone get all these very unrelated skills, right?
Sure.
And get them to a level of proficiency where they can add value to the stakeholders that are actually like subject matter experts in that area.
So when I entered the field, I think my path was more similar to what you're describing, which is I took some time to learn HTML, CSS, Java, PHP, Photoshop. And maybe what we should add to our common core list is a desire to learn things and be naturally curious. Product management is rarely a job of succeeding because someone gave you a piece of paper and said, go do exactly this. There's a need to sort of appreciate autonomy, some autonomy. The thing what you're saying is that is one path, right? You have an experience, you have built a career or part of a career or the early stages of your career in a specific specialty, and now you work on products in that space. I think that's a very natural thing, right? You can even see it in your consumer life. When you're 16, you drive a car, you don't really think a lot about how cars work. You buy the shiniest thing you're allowed to buy or the cheapest thing that's available within your price range.
Mhm.
And then you start to learn more about cars. And when you're 40 and you buy a car, your approach is very, very different. And it's an informed consumer who's looking at reports and mileage and all of these terms that you really did not give an F about at 16. So that's sort of the consumer parallel, right? When you start your career in cybersecurity, you work in cybersecurity and you work on the field and you understand the field. And then you sort of look up and start thinking about the products that would better your field. But product management has grown so much that you could enter it directly out of undergrad. You could enter it without going to undergrad. And so you really have to think about whether you can be naturally curious for a really long time and whether you have the communication and critical thinking skills to navigate new topics continuously.
Fair enough. In terms of the steps to get there, there's no formal requirements, but the industry seems to favor people that you mentioned, BAs and liberal arts. But you mentioned that there's lots of very, very important skills to have in order to find success in this role. And some of those, I just want to kind of go over them because we talked for so long. So I just like to combine them together.
To recap and synthesize? Yeah, sure.
So you have to be a generalist. QA was one of the skills, technical skills that would help in this area. Data analytics, having an understanding of marketing and funnels, an understanding of cyber attacks, design, cost benefit optimization, communication skills, negotiation skills, the ability to create and manage partnerships. And the ones that you mentioned that were very, very core skills was possessing critical thinking, the ability to communicate, and desire to continuously learn.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot. I understand the generalist part now because you can't be pegged. You need to be able to think in many different hats, right? In order to find success in this field.
I think that's right. You have to be able to tell the same story a few different ways, and you have to be comfortable doing that. To your previous point, I don't think it's like, I think people who have liberal arts backgrounds find success, but the industry prefers people who are engineers, or maybe people who are designers. They tend to choose people they view as having sort of like a background in software. But the reality is that products are built best by people who both understand software and are users of it.
So we hammered in a lot with respect to the skills that you need. What type of personality traits should just steer clear from this profession?
That is a good way of putting that question. If you would like a prioritized list of what needs to be done every day, you should steer clear. If you find it annoying to have more than 2 or 3 meetings a day, you should steer clear. If it's difficult to listen to people when you believe they're wrong, you should steer clear. Um, I think in general, a lot of the job is painting a vision, which is exciting for a lot of people, and I think it's a very natural human trait. We all love painting a picture of what could be. But the rest of it is conveying that picture to everyone. Painting a picture is a very natural human thing. It's exciting. Painting a vision, sort of saying, this is where we're headed, and here's why. Convincing people the here's why part is less attractive to some people. And so we should sort of really focus on jobs that don't require that. Or some people really don't like ambiguity and sort of having the day-to-day change up on them. If you don't like that, product management is primarily that. Your priority set is defined by you, but the world often intervenes.
Okay, so essentially, checklists. If you have too many checklists, if you're too structured, it seems like if you're just maniacal about routine and are not open to change, this is probably not a good field for you. That's what it seems like.
I mean, not even maniacal. I think just like if you prefer a rigid structure or routine, it's going to be a little bit harder.
Fair enough. And it makes sense. You're a generalist. It sounds like to me, I've never worked in this field, but like a lot of people are going to be picking your brain and presenting their problems to you. Are you like a problem fixer for like 20 departments?
If by problem fixer you mean the primary answer is finding different ways of saying no, then yes.
I just feel like because you're so in the middle of things that a lot of different competencies come to you to seek input. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, that's right. To seek input and maybe more often to share their opinion about where things are going. It's your job to tease out what's going to impact the product, what is pattern recognition from the expert who's talking to you, right? What do they see that you can't see, and what's their preference? And that can be really difficult for people to parse out, right? I think early on in my career, it was kind of like, you don't even know the right questions to ask because you're in a meeting with somebody and you're negotiating about how an API might be structured. You don't really have the right unless you understand how APIs work. It's difficult to understand what the person is telling you unless you actually understand their field to some level and you understand that there's more to the field below that.
Fair enough. So you might be wondering, why do I keep going back to this topic? But one of the main things that I like to hone in on is, how do you get into this path? I want you to picture you're like a mentor and Bethany showed up in front of you and Bethany's like, Bhavna, I just want to get into product. How do I do it? Can you take me through what steps you would recommend to Bethany?
Well, small plug, I am a mentor on ADP list and Amazing Design People list and mentorcruise.com. Please come find me. We can chat about this for a much longer period. But the other thing I would say is, where is Beth coming from? That is what's going to tell me how to help her shape her next steps. One part, though, the common part, for anyone is going to be, tell me about a product you love and tell me why you love it and how it's changed since you started using it. The next question I'm going to ask is, tell me about a product you hate and why do you dislike it? What would make it better? You need to be able to think about those things somewhat continuously. And then you need to start being able to identify what the point of a product is. So there's a lot of marketing speak and sort of promotional content wrapped around a value proposition. But the value proposition does actually exist. It is a real thing. And by that I mean, Netflix will say, we deliver content everywhere. Uber might say, our job is to take anything from point A to point B. That's marketing. There is a value proposition underneath that. You need to be able to find it in every product that you use.
Fair enough. So Bethany these are like very contemplating type of questions, right? These are the things that you ought to sit and consider. Is there anything, okay, so imagine I come out of high school and I have my only experience to my name is I know how to develop wireframes, right? Like, what kind of advice can you give me in terms of what are the next steps? Like, I want to be a product manager within the next 2 years. Like, what can I do?
Years. Okay. Yeah. You just came out of high school. That is amazing. Sit down and define a product, build the product, launch the product. That's how you become a product manager. I would say my early job, I had a portfolio. Same as a designer. Here are the products I worked on. Here's why I think they're valuable. Here's a prototype that I coded. Here's wireframes, and here's how I went from idea to wireframe to prototype. All of that has become so much easier. Go on lovable.ai or .dev, go to Bolt, sit down, build your product, right? It doesn't even have to work. That's the thing about product. It's not about nailing the engineering. It's about nailing the problem. How do you elegantly solve a problem in a way that meets the majority of the people who use it? It meets their needs. And it meets their needs in such a simple and easy process that they feel like it's part of their day-to-day life. This is the way things should work. And the thing about working in product is you should really subscribe to Don Norman's books. You should understand Eric Ries's approach to iteration. And you should be thinking about the way that Andreessen Horowitz thinks about the development of a product. Or you should be able to identify the major thinkers that you're aligned with. And it's become easier and easier and easier to find those things out. You can literally sit down with Perplexity or ChatGPT or Claude, have a conversation with it, ask it what you think you believe about products and product management, and build your knowledge, and start reading the books that are sort of discussed in that conversation. That's one way to go about it coming out of high school. But the number one thing I would recommend is building a portfolio, saying, here are problems that I've seen in the world. Here are better ways to solve those problems. Here are new ways to solve those problems. And here's why. The why is such a crucial element of the entire solution.
Fair enough. So if I do this for 2 years, I can become a product manager at a company, at some random company.
If you did this straight for 2 years and you did more than, 6 products, you'd probably be a founder. Forget about being employed by a company.
Fair enough. Well, I'm just trying to get someone from high school. Bethany, in this instance, needs to somehow become a product manager. So Bethany needs to read the books that you mentioned, contemplate a lot with respect to how a product manager thinks about products, and create a portfolio and essentially go from, idea to generated, whether it works or it doesn't. And basically just get practical skills in the field and then share that portfolio with an employer. And it's possible for them to get a job.
Can I synthesize it?
Of course.
Okay. If Bethany and I are having a chat, I would say find 3 problems that you think are important to solve, and they don't have to be big. The smaller, the better. Go on lovable.dev, go on an LLM that's conversational, build out your requirements for how to solve that problem, and then build a prototype. Then share it with people and see what they think and iterate on it. When you go to interview, tell them what you learned in the experience. You'll have a job.
Wow, that's great. Right there. That's what I was looking for. Okay, so now we can move on because Bethany's got a job.
Because Bethany's got a job.
Bethany's
Yes.
got a job.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. All right. So, how is AI influencing this field? I mean, you just told me about lovable.ai and multiple other. You mentioned earlier that, some of the translating from like business to hard coding it or whatever can be done via AI. So, can you give me a few examples in addition? Just like, is AI influencing this field in a positive way? Like, should people be a little worried that AI is going to get rid of product managers? And like, tell me about AI in the product world.
I think there's a strong desire to be scared, and that's reasonable. That's understanding. It is a massive shift in what's automated, what's possible. My biggest concern about AI is not actually whether it will take all the jobs, but whether it will remove, as the headline goes, but whether it will remove the period of apprenticeship. Right now, AI feels like an amazing tool for someone who is mid-career or above, where they can reason, negotiate, and use their own lived pattern recognition to understand the results that they're seeing in their conversation with the LLM. The LLM is telling you what is the most predictable next set of outcomes with some pattern, like parameters that you can use to like find the second or third or 15th most predictable. But the reality is that's the core function. How variable you make it is irrelevant in a certain context. And so my concern is more that a lot of what I know is due to me actually doing the tasks. And if you remove that, you might not actually catch those mistakes. An easier parallel is like with history or something like that, where you can be fed incorrect facts and you don't know that they're incorrect because you haven't actually read the original text. For product specifically, I think what we're seeing is a lot of automation, and there's a need to sort of be a stronger quality control. But I would say we should 100% be using these tools, right? Like lovable.dev really just helps you build that first iteration of the product sooner. It doesn't build the next Google. It can't do that. But it can give you a prototype to start thinking about what's valuable. It can give you a first launch that might not withstand wild amounts of adoption, but would withstand your friends and family sort of checking it out, and you would be able to understand how to find bugs, fix bugs, and develop them. ChatGPT can totally write you all of the requirements you need for an application that already exists. But if you want to build something new, you're going to have to go in and fix that, refine that, check it, review it. So I think it comes back to the critical thinking. It comes back to the narrative, to the communication, to the negotiation. You might be able to do a lot with a slimmer team, but it's still going to take a team.
And it's interesting because I used to think, when the whole Jobmageddon and this and that with AI, I used to think that, they are going to get rid of jobs, but I don't feel that way anymore. Personally speaking, I think AI is amazing. I think it's going to get rid of all the boring nuisance tasks that I don't want to do, and it's going to leave, I think people are, over time, they're going to begin to enjoy their jobs more because they're going to be just doing the job part. Like every single occupation, no matter what it is, it has those menial tasks that nobody wants to do. The rudimentary stuff, which just bores you, the administrative stuff, blah, blah, blah. And I feel like AI is going to just lessen and lessen and lessen that. So, but in terms of like, for instance, there's this incredible solution that came out from Bloomberg. It's like a contract negotiation
Yeah.
for lawyers. And
Just
I
yeah.
played around with it and it's great, but unless you're an attorney, you won't really understand the value of
Mhm.
the questions that you should be asking, right? And how, like, there's no way that a non-attorney will understand the risk of even the things that it populates for you, right? You might think you do, right? But you won't, right? And so, sure, a few less lawyers will be needed because the AI can do it, but I think people are just gonna get better and better and better at their jobs, and it's just gonna become more strategic, right? So I feel
That's the
like,
hope. Yeah.
I mean, it would be crazy to think, but you know what? You mentioned something that was interesting in the beginning. You said, nobody could contemplate putting critical information in their phones just 10 years
Yes.
ago. And, now I tap my phone for anything and everything. And so who knows in what direction it will go, but I'm under the impression that our value is going to increase, not decrease with AI. And I hope so, at least. Maybe I'm just being optimistic, but we'll see.
Well,
It's hard to be pessimistic and live, so
that if that's the reason for your optimism in AI is that it's difficult to be pessimistic and live, I feel like it's a pretty low bar.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I gotta sleep. All right.
yeah, I need to rest at night, so
Yeah, AI is
it's
not gonna do
optimism.
that for me. Okay, so I gotta have my perspective until guilty until proven otherwise, or optimistic until proven otherwise. Here.
The only plug I'll make is this. I think it's important to do both.
Mm,
I think it's really important to understand AI and leverage AI and be aware of the tools that are coming out. Hilariously, we're at a point where AI or the LLM that sits underneath the product that you're using is not actually the differentiator on whether it's adopted. It's the design, it's the experience, it's how you solved the problem.
mhm.
So I think it's important to know what's being adopted, how they work, why they work, etc. But I also think it's incredibly important to know how to do the task on your own. And I know that sounds boring and mid-careerist, but the parallel I would make is if you walk into a Michelin kitchen today and you say you want to have an internship or a stage, they're going to make you crack eggs. They're going to make you do your knife skills. They're going to make you learn the basics. And I think it's important for you to know what the basics are. It's not writing a Jira ticket, it's writing a user story, for example, and how to do them and how to defend the way that you do them. The reason that you're able to use this Bloomberg tool is because you went through the apprenticeship phase. Someone took the time to explain to you all of the different ways that your life could be absolutely miserable if you messed up. That's missing today.
Mhm.
That's missing when we say, just use AI, get rid of, the bottom percent, and let's move forward.
Yeah, I have seen that, and I do foresee that. Well, the reason why I'm not so concerned about that is because this is what I anticipate happening. Um, Corporate America is going to be corporate America. They're going to cut the bottom for a bit. Then they're going to hit a period of time where the talent's just going to be absolutely wasteful, right? Because they don't have that good foundation in order to even utilize AI. And then they'll create comprehensive solutions in order for all
Bespoke
the
training.
yeah, for the juniors to somehow acclimate and get up to speed significantly faster than ever before. They'll undergo brutal training and they'll get up to speed much better, much faster. So there will be a solution, but there will be like a little period of time where we're gonna suffer because it's already happening, right?
Yeah.
So in Silicon Valley, supposedly they have like a mass exodus of all software engineers. right? And so I run a career podcast. I have a career channel, and
Yeah.
so sometimes like I made like a short, and one of the shorts that I had, I was relying on the career database with respect to how many software engineers would get hired, and supposedly it's a very in-demand job. And I got all these comments and emails about you don't know, and everyone's getting laid off, and everyone's getting fired, and AI is going to destroy us. And I was like, okay, let's go check out the news. And to an extent, they were right. There's been so many people that have been let go, but I feel like there were many factors influencing that: inflation, blah, 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 people's pockets, AI, all happening at once, right? And so, but anyways, let's not go down that road. Let's get back to product. And so,
Could we discuss it just for 1 second longer?
sure. Yeah.
That's true. I do. We are seeing a shrinking of jobs and of revenue and so on. But what we're seeing is also a reflection of the path of the way products are built. So in the age of MySpace, everyone was encouraged to create something fully unique, right? If you would go to a agency's website, maybe it would have like a little mouse trailer that they had independently defined. There was a verge and a burgeoning of like, can we make different types of UX experiences using only CSS, keep it super lightweight. All of these innovations, right, that were happening were about differentiation. And as more and more people use the internet for things like buying shoes or clothes or food or whatever, and the internet became sort of where more and more people turned on a daily basis, we saw convergence. We wanted the home button to always work in the same way. We wanted the checkout flow to always look the same way. We wanted the login flow to look the same way. And so we saw a standardization. And that's really what's allowed LLMs to thrive in development, right? Is a standardization and a protocol definition of how websites work, how banking websites work, how e-commerce websites work, how food delivery websites work, and sort of a continuous iteration to say, users want predictability. I can't go to 50 sites and have all 50 sites work in a completely different way, right? And we see that same thing with passwords and the idea of open authentication and its adoption and proliferation by Facebook and Google and so on. It's the idea that I can't keep pushing a user to adopt more and more and more and more variation for their daily tasks. If you think about the real life example, when you go into a store, you know that there's a checkout kiosk, you're going to go look at some stuff and you're going to go over there and that checkout kiosk is going to be near the exit. You're never going to walk to the back end of a store, check out, and then walk all the way to the front. That's not how it works, right? When you go into a hotel room, when you hit the wall next to the door, you're going to hit a light switch. It might be the left wall and it might be the right wall, but it's going to be there. And so there are all of these protocols and design standards that we've already developed that are just moving into the internet. And that's what's allowed the idea of something like Copilot to become so valuable, right? The idea of like just saying, okay, what do I need to set up a checkout page to become the drop of a hat? And that's okay. That's okay because we're going to find other things to become bespoke and to become interesting. That hasn't like closed down the innovation of stores, right? The idea that the checkout is near the exit hasn't killed all stores. And so I think we have to think about what the value is and what the problem is that we're trying to solve. And again, we come back to like the core role of product. What is it that the user actually wants? And where does that intersect with business value?
Fair enough. We've had the opportunity to discuss how you become. Bethany is a product consultant, all right? And
she's grown. Okay.
she's grown. Oh, no, she's not a consultant yet. She's just a manager. Yeah, you're right. We figured out the skills. We figured out what type of personality traits should steer clear from this. We've discussed about AI, right? I want to hop over to how much money do product managers earn? Like so Bethany just applied for a job, right? What should she say is her starting salary, like if she's negotiating? Let's say it's in California. It's in like a bigger city.
Helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a bigger city on the coasts, I think you're looking at the low hundreds, like 100,000.
Bethany just came out of high school,
Oh,
and
sorry.
she's got a portfolio, and she's starting off at 100K. I mean,
Okay.
we gotta we gotta reevaluate career paths.
And a job. She'd worked at it for 2 years.
Fair. Let's go entry level, and then then we can discuss this as well. Like, I'd like to know, essentially, like, when people enter career paths, they're
Yeah,
interested in knowing, like, do they have a future? Like, do you get capped out and stuff like that? So Bethany's like, she's applying for her first job. What should she
sure.
expect? And then what should she expect 5 years, 10 years from now?
So if she comes out of high school, then she's looking at like somewhere around $70,000 to $75,000. It's not a bad first job, I would argue.
That is
Um,
incredible.
yeah, but I'm assuming that she has built some products on her own, right? So really what you're doing at that point is you're starting to do the job before you got the job. The other thing I would say is it does vary a lot, right? So if you're all the way, let's say you're in Tennessee and you're working for an e-commerce company out there, you might start at like 45,000.
Hmm.
So it really can range from like 45 to 75 or 85,000.
Hmm.
If you come out of school, out of college as a BA, then you're looking to crack 100 fairly easily. If you're coming out of an MBA, now you're looking, in the 120s, 130s, because the assumption is that you're bringing strategy, you're bringing an understanding of pricing or of other activities, and you haven't just been in school the entire time. You've had real world experience. The thing about software so far is that it's still really easy to launch something. It's still really easy to build something and put it out in the world. It's super hard to say, I'm going to build a house at 18 and then go build a house. But you could build a product and you could launch that product and you could market that product and you could learn a lot of things independently.
Hmm.
And I think all of those activities provide a unique path to getting to a higher salary faster.
So essentially, depending on how much depth there is to your portfolio, you can kind of start at a different salary point. But for the most part, in a busy city, in a metropolitan city, you're probably going to start somewhere between 70 and 80. And then as you get into smaller towns and villages and cities, you'll get 40. So what can we expect like 10 years into the career?
What can you expect 10 years into the career? Are you asking me my salary?
Oh no, not at all. I mean, you're not a product manager anymore. You're a product consultant, so it's not directly yours.
I think,
How
look,
much
I
do
think
you make?
yeah, could you just tell me out of curiosity,
Bhavna, can you share exactly what you made as a 10th year product
pre or
manager?
post tax?
Pre.
Okay. I know that you're going to hate this answer, but it depends. It depends on the kind of product and company you're working at. It depends on whether there's equity in your deal. It depends on whether you're a consultant and you have bonus based on company and personal performance. And it depends on whether you are part of I really hate to say the word, but Mang or not, whether you're part of the top players in the field. So if
Mhm.
you're working at Planeteer, that's one scenario. If you're working at eBay, that's a second scenario. If you're working at a no-name startup that's pursuing seed funding, that's a third. And they're all going to vary pretty drastically.
Mhm.
You can 10 years in make, depending on your expertise. And today, really depending on, let's say if you have a background in algorithms and machine learning, you could be making anywhere from like 800,000 to 900,000 all the way down to 200,000, 150,000.
Did you say
Um,
900,000?
yeah, it really depends on what you're actually bringing to the table. At 10 years in, it depends on what your role is. Are you a product manager, a senior product manager, a group product manager? Are you essentially like next in line to be the CPO? There's a wide variety. And it also depends on the throughput of the product, right? What are you actually responsible for? Are you moving billions of dollars of P&L?
Okay, so that is epic because I understand there's so much variation with respect to salary and all of that. So, but 10 years, you're telling me on low end, people are making somewhere around 200 grand. And if they're bringing lots of value, they're making up to 8 to 900 grand. These are ridiculous numbers that you don't find. As a salary, if you're getting like 500, 600, 700,000, like you stop caring. At that point, you're basically,
Yeah.
you're not in that $10 million land where you can purchase anything and anything, but like basically you're getting paid for an expertise. Like nobody that earns, like, I shouldn't say nobody, but is very few people that
Yeah.
work 40 hours even and earn $500,000 because it's their expertise that matters so much, right?
Nobody works 40 hours a week in software, just to be clear.
They work more, less,
Yes,
like
more.
way more.
There are stories, of course, of people, engineers mostly, who are working multiple jobs, etc. But the thing about product is that it's a face job.
Yeah.
You gotta talk to people. You gotta talk to people repeatedly and endlessly.
Mhm.
It is incredibly hard to find like a lazy girl job or an anti-work job, both of which I approve of. Just to be clear, in case she sees this video. But it is incredibly hard to be a product manager and just be like, you know what? It's 5 o'clock. I'll see you later.
Mhm.
And like just check out.
Mhm.
Your job is to make things come together. And inherently, you're put into the situation of any middle manager, which is a mild to extensive form of overextension.
So, I mean, it's good to know, so most people that start their career discovery journey, they're under the impression that there's only a handful of professions that get into that level of pay, right? For
Yeah.
instance, like if you go on any career website and you filter by income, all you'll see is doctors. You'll see cardiologists, you'll see anesthesiologists. Like that's all you
Yes.
see. Like in
Well,
the upper echelon of salaries, you pretty much just by traditional search methods, right? And so it's good to know that there are career paths where if you spend enough time, you're at least earning 200, 250 grand, right? Because I mean, by the time you're 10 years in, adjusted for inflation, you just kind of want to be around that range. So you're like, it's a good amount of money, and you have a good
it's
life.
great. Yeah,
Um,
it's a great amount of money. I think it's important to watch your lifestyle creep. So if you live in San Francisco and you make $250,000 and you have, let's say, a 5-year-old going to private school and a mortgage and 2 Teslas, it's not going to go as far as you think.
Yeah.
But I agree that it's a great amount of money. And I think if you manage to get in and stay in a place like Meta or Apple or Google, and you work there for 10 years and you continue to get promoted to group product manager,
mhm.
then you could be looking at $500,000 to $700,000 a year. That's a lot of ifs, to be clear, but it is important to call that out.
Well, I mean, regardless of like 500 to 700, even in big law, right? Like only if you get the opportunity to join an AM Law 100 firm do
Yeah.
you get to crack those. So there's
You
always
got to
the
put in the
ifs,
hours
right?
and the billables and be
Exactly.
liked, and yeah, totally.
And so I understand every single field has that, right? But just to know that there is an opportunity to earn
Mhm.
$500,000, not many professions offer that. So a lot of jobs are dead end, right? So you cap out at like 120, 130. And so it's good to know that the ceiling is basically how much you continue to improve and how much value you can bring, right? Because sooner or later, a company will find value in that and pay you. So that's how
Yeah.
I see it, at least.
I think that's true. I do think it's also important to remember that we live in an age of entrepreneurship, and to remember that if you're looking at like entry level, you and I talked about a job that could be somewhere between like 45, right, and $85,000, $50,000 to $80,000, let's say. If you're an entry level tile setter, a person who tiles a bathroom under 1 year of experience, you're projected to make like $68,000 a year.
Hmm.
You're going to make more.
Yeah.
And you're going to have less meetings, and you're going to have less conversation about sort of intangible things and less politics. It's going to be, to do a thing or not do a thing.
Hmm.
And it's going to be that simple. So it's
On
something
that
to keep in
note,
mind.
on that
Yeah.
note, what are some of the biggest challenges that you face as a product manager? Is that it? The politics? The BS?
The hardest parts of the job are keeping your pulse on everything and remembering to communicate in a way that fits your audience. Some people are great at that, other people are less so. And then I think as your career continues, it's really important to remain in a learning mode and a growth mindset. And I find that it can be harder to do that when you've been doing the job for a while.
Hmm. So, in terms of challenging, it's challenging to continuously grow because you're busy or because
I
you're
think
more
it's
knowledgeable.
challenging. Yeah, I think it's challenging to continue to grow when you feel like you've seen a lot of things.
Fair
Right.
enough.
That space for the newness of things can sort of be diminished because you've seen patterns of what it's likely to be. But it's super important to remain engaged, and I think AI is a fantastic example of that. There are literally hundreds, thousands of different wrappers coming out like every week, and you can't know them all. You have to have like an experienced person's filter, but you do have to keep engaging and learning and knowing, why does this work? How does this work? Is it interesting? What made it easier for people to use than this other product? It's I find sometimes when I talk to clients who have been doing this job for a long time and become senior leaders, it can be hard to remember that.
Okay, so that's the challenge of being a product manager. What do you find most rewarding about this career path outside of the crazy pay after 10 years?
The crazy. So just to be clear, I'm not making that. The thing I find rewarding. So there is. My husband is a musician, and every once in a while, he hasn't toured recently, but every once in a while we'll run into a stranger who will recognize him from when he toured, and they will be like, "Oh my God, Peter Munters, I can't believe I'm meeting you." That's literally never going to happen in my life. We often joke that no one's ever going to come up and say, "Oh my God, Bhavna Devani, you led the strategic transformation at my company and I loved my job so much more." That's never going to happen. That's okay. It really is about the creation of something. And I think in that sense, for product management, there's a very natural human joy of embarking on an effort and then sort of seeing the culmination of that effort in somebody's hands. Even if there are no rolling credits and your name isn't present, there's a sense of ownership and belonging to the creation and articulation of that idea into a real experience.
That's cool. And that's rewarding.
It is. Yeah.
So I used to work at Capital One, and it was really interesting because whenever I used to talk to all the product people, they were so proud of their products, and they're like, "I did this, and you're using that solution. I created that.
I made that. Yeah. Yeah. Are you gonna recognize them when you see them at the bar? I don't think so.
I mean, I appreciate it. So I worked on, I can't talk about it, but I worked on a huge credit card offering, and somebody was using it, and I created the entire mechanism. Like, obviously I'm not a product guy, but I had to do the entire, it was more contractual in nature. And so it felt like I was creating a product. And I remember like when it got launched, I was like, I did that. It was a great feeling, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the rewarding aspect of the job. So we've talked a lot. I feel like if you've gotten to this point, you have a pretty good idea what this profession entails. Like, what advice would you give to someone considering this career path?
Build and talk to people about it. It doesn't even have to be, when I say build, I don't mean launch a product on the App Store or whatever, or build a website. Literally build a prototype, draw a prototype, like use paper and pencil. It does not matter, but keep looking at the world around you and interrogate how it could work better and why what you think is better or isn't. And then test out that understanding with people.
Okay, that's great. You mentioned the use of pen and paper. What tools,
Pencil.
sorry, what tools do you think product managers should know even at a basic level?
It's changing a lot, but I think you should know how at least one programming language works and how the internet works and how APIs work. What is, a service architecture? What is a stack? These are all things I feel like are sort of core components that you should know. You can go to school and you can take Comp Sci 101, or you can learn this stuff on your own. There is a preponderance of information out there. It is so much. Would strongly suggest that you know how the internet works, how what you're building sits on top of that, and where it actually plays. And then I would say it's really important to understand usability. What does it mean for something to be usable? Who gets to define and be the arbiter of usable? And then lastly, but also most importantly, to understand the basic minimum of business. What is the revenue of every product you use? Where does it come from? Who's paying for it? How do they pay for upgrades? Why do they decide to invest in new features or not invest in new features? I feel like those are 3 things that you really need to understand and can understand without school to understand how the job's going to work.
What are some specific tools though? Do you use software that I see the term Scrum Master all the time.
Yeah.
What's a Scrum Master and what kind of tools do you there's Asana and Jira you mentioned multiple times. What are some of those type of softwares that you would expect that, hey, if I'm hiring Bethany, you better know these?
Yeah, that's a really good question. At this point, so it does change. I do want to call that out. Right. So if we had had this conversation 10 years ago, it would have been maybe Photoshop. If we had this conversation 6 or 7 years ago, it would have been Sketch. Now it's Canva. Canva and Photoshop are good options for design. Some sort of ticket management system, it doesn't really matter which one, is important. So use Asana if you like Asana, use Jira, use Notion. Be good at it, I think, is the most important thing. Understand how it works and be willing to learn a different one is the second most important thing. And then beyond those 2 things, I think just availing yourself of what's out there in terms of AI is important. So I really like lovable.dev right now. I've heard great things about fireflies.ai for meeting notes and meeting capture. Notion and Miro have some great tools that are AI empowered. And what's sitting underneath those is really similar things each time. It's about Agile, which is what Scrum is sort of a derivation of, but it's about Agile, which is widely adopted within software and also within other industries. And it's about design thinking.
Wow, that was a lot.
Sorry.
I feel like I've used so many of those softwares. So
Great.
I can pretty much be a product manager. I'm kidding.
Oh, yeah. Just could you just go back and graduate from high school and then we'll start this story again. Yeah.
I want to know before we end the interview what you do at Apricity Consulting.
So I've been a product consultant for about 8 years at Carbon 5 and McKinsey, and now I've started my own shop. And we're focused on product strategy. And really that means making sure that your leaders are aligned, right? They have a singular vision for what the strategy is going forward. And they're able to leverage basic lean startup skills to test out new ideas, figure out where to invest in those new ideas, and then build and bring those ideas to market. So if you're looking to build a new product, or if you're looking to go to a new market, then you should give us a call.
Fair enough. And so I like to close off all my interviews by just asking people short burst answers to the following two questions.
Let's do it.
What is the best career advice that you have ever received?
Work yourself out of a job.
What is the worst career advice you have ever received?
I'm really tempted to say work yourself out of a job.
Okay, so why is it, this has happened before as well. So why is it the best and worst advice?
Um, really early on, I had a great boss who told me my job was to make sure that I had done my job so well, I was no longer needed, and that I had empowered my team so deeply and so cleanly that they understood the role and the task and the vision of what was at hand. I think it should be pretty obvious why that could be bad advice, but it's really good advice as well. Because the moment that you have set your team up for success, you've proven two things. One, you can build followership and education within your team, and two, you can actually do the job. And those are the requisites for getting promoted, right? Can you actually empower and create that development in others? And can you actually do the job at hand? It's bad advice because in a down market, it's really easy to let go of that person.
Yeah. I was like, oh boy, you're going to get fired.
Usually I've gotten promoted, but yeah, occasionally.
Fair enough. Work yourself out of a job. That's a good one. It's interesting. During different stages of your life, the same exact career advice could destroy you, right?
Yeah.
And so I know I put a lot of career advice on here, but it sometimes hurts me because, I'll give you an example.
Sure.
A really popular one is work smart, not hard, or whatever, right?
Oh, yes.
And I think that's awful advice if there is a junior, right? And I don't care how much of a genius you are, you could have gotten a 4.0 GPA, or you are just the smartest person in your group and your family and everything. When you start at any field, I feel like you do need to work hard, just because if you have any intention of moving up, at least the acquisition of skills is very different than just obtaining and retaining information, right? And so it's just you do need to put in a certain number of hours, and some work ethic is associated with that if you want to get anywhere, or at least climb a ladder or get promoted. So I feel like in today's generation, where we get so much of our advice from TikTok, then some people think that it's okay to just work 20 hours and get full pay, and it's not good advice because it makes you very entitled after a while, right? And you sure, if you're 40 45 years old and you have tons of experience and you
then
bring
you're
in
allowed to
value,
work 20 hours.
I think so. I think honestly, at that point, your value is that, hey, I know anything and everything about this. I stuck it out for about 18 years in this career path. Trust me, what that kid can do in 14 to 15 hours, I can do in one, right? So I feel at that point, I don't expect you to work 40 hours. And if you don't, it is what it is, because your value is there, right? But in the beginning, regardless of how intelligent you are, you can't bring in value until you've had real life experiences, right? And that just takes time to build up, and you need to be involved in every element of that particular profession for a period of time before you're oh, okay, I can bring value in any shape or form.
I think that's a strong perspective. I think it sits counter with your perspective on AI.
Yeah. We'll have to juggle that, and we'll work with that as time. I know I just see it a lot now, and it irks me. So I work with lots
how do you know it's not your 40s showing?
Yeah, it could be. I'm not there yet. Do I look 40 yet?
No, I am
Okay,
40.
all right. I'm not there yet, but
I'm just projecting.
but yeah, I'm getting my back in my days. That speech ready? No, not there yet. But I just feel like you just have to. Maybe it's because I had to work really hard, and I'm projecting what I had to do in order to get here, on everybody else.
I think having a sense of what here is super important. And that's what I love about what you're doing. For a long time, And still sometimes today, my idea of what it means to be accomplished is externally provided. And I think that is a huge trap that people are starting to wake up to, thankfully. But most people in our generation, right, don't really have a concept of what here is. Where is the here that we're trying to get to? What does it mean to actually be quote unquote here? And I think taking a perspective on your career about what you want to achieve, even if it's just, I did a job and I was good at it, it doesn't really matter what the level is, but having it be your own definition and one that you revise for yourself is really important.
Mhm. That was some good advice as well. Thank
That's
you.
my advice to you.
Fair enough. Well, thank you so much, Bhavna. It was amazing. I have a very good idea of product managers and how to enter the field and everything else. So I appreciate you taking the time. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, this was great, and best wishes to Bethany.
If you watch the episode, you'd know. Have a good
All
one.
right. All right. Talk to you later.
All right. Well, that's it for this episode of the My Career Shop podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a much better idea of how to become a product strategist or manager. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and leave a review. And also let me know which profession you would like to hear from next. Until next time.